Hey friends, welcome back to the Firstieland Podcast. I'm your host, Molly Schwab, and today we're tackling one of the most challenging things to teach in kindergarten and first grade, writing. In episode 10, we talked about the first steps in writing, which were labeling a picture. And today we're taking that one step further with how to write a sentence. We're going to break it all down from what kids need before they even start writing to how you can guide them step by step to writing a complete, thoughtful sentence. So let's dive in. Hey there, I'm Molly from Firstieland, a former elementary teacher with over 30 years of experience in kindergarten and first grade. I'm here to help make teaching a little easier and a lot more fun. Whether you're looking for the perfect read aloud, fresh writing ideas, or simple classroom tips, I've got quick, practical strategies you can use right away. New teacher or experienced educator, there's something for everyone in Firstieland. So grab your coffee and teacher bag. Let's get started. If you've ever sat next to a kindergarten or first grade student who's staring at a blank piece of paper like it's a foreign object, you know how tricky writing can be for kids. Writing a sentence isn't just about putting words on paper. It's about thinking critically and organizing your ideas, knowing your sounds, forming your letters, and then somehow pulling all that together into one tiny little line of text. It's kind of a big deal, and it can be hard for kids. Before kids even begin to think about writing sentences, they need to have some basic skills under their belt. First, they have to have some letter sound knowledge. They don't necessarily need to know every letter in the alphabet and the sound that it makes, but they need a good foundation so that they can begin to write a few words. When I taught kindergarten, we didn't introduce letters in alphabetical order, but rather in a sequence where kids would be able to start to form words quickly. They also have to know how to form the letters on paper, so that's where handwriting comes in. If kids don't know how to write the letters, they won't be able to put them together to make words. So letter sound knowledge and letter formation are the foundation that kids have to have in order to begin writing any kinds of words or sentences. Usually that takes place in kindergarten, so by the time kids get to first grade, they're ready to begin writing words at the start of the school year. But you might get some kids that aren't ready to do that. We all know in our fantasy dream first grade class that all the kids come in knowing all their letters and sounds, and they can write all their letters perfectly. But in reality, that's rarely the case. So you should really do an assessment at the beginning of the year to find out where your students are and then base your lessons accordingly. If you have kids who need more help with letters and sounds, you'll need to differentiate your lessons to accommodate them, because if you don't, they're just going to get further and further behind without that foundation. Another skill kids need is to understand that letters go together to make words. They need to be able to sound out a word, hear the letter sounds, and then write them on paper. Again, this is a skill that should be taught in kindergarten, but you're going to want to review some of this at the very beginning of the year in first grade. So the beginning steps, the foundation to writing, are to learn the letters, the sounds that they make, and how to write those letters on paper. It all goes together, usually in kindergarten. That's where the bulk of your time in kindergarten should be spent. This is the true foundation, and without it, kids are going to move on to first grade and they won't be able to begin the writing process. If kids don't have a good foundation in letters and sounds and how to form the letters on paper, then they're going to have a really hard time writing a word or a sentence, because so much of their time is going to be spent just thinking about what letter makes a certain sound or how to write that particular letter on paper. And so they're going to lose their train of thought on what they want their sentence to say, and it's just going to be a big hot mess. So they have to have that foundation and be ready to start writing sentences. So don't skip that critical first step in writing: letters, sounds, formation. No matter if a child's in kindergarten or first grade, they have to have that foundation. So if you have to, begin there in first grade. You're going to have kids that come to you in first grade that aren't going to be able to do this, and you're going to have to start there with those kids, because you'll just be spinning your wheels with them all year trying to get them to write without that foundation. Okay, so once kids can form letters, know what sounds they make, and are able to blend them together to form words, now they're ready to write a sentence. So now let's think about what kids actually have to do in order to write a sentence. It's a lot of steps. And I don't think as teachers, we always think about everything that they're having to process in their heads as they're getting ready to write a sentence. First, they have to think about what they're actually going to write. That can be a challenge in itself, just coming up with an idea. And then they have to plan that actual sentence in their head. And then they've got to remember that sentence that they just planned out and write it down without forgetting any of the words. And then when they have it all written down, they have to look it over to see if they remembered all the extra stuff, like spaces between their words and capitals and punctuation. I mean, just thinking about it is exhausting. So it's no wonder that it's hard for kids. And it's no wonder that you find them sitting there just staring at the paper sometimes. So let's break it down step by step to teach that to kids. The first thing you'll need is an anchor chart that shows kids what a good sentence looks like. In my room, I had an anchor chart that gave a simple definition. It said, "What is a sentence?" And then under that, it said, "A sentence is a complete thought. Every sentence has a capital, spaces between the words, and punctuation at the end." Then I had a picture of a dog on it, and then the sentence read, "I see a big dog." And then I had arrows that were pointing to the capital and the spaces and the period at the end. We kept this anchor chart in our room all year, so kids could refer to it when they were writing and remember all the things that a sentence needs. So you're going to want to begin sentence writing by showing your class an anchor chart like that and talking about all the things that a sentence needs. You're also going to need to tell kids that a sentence has two parts. The naming part, that's the subject, and the action part, that's the predicate. And yes, they actually learn subject and predicate in first grade. You don't always have to call it that. You can call it the naming and the action part, but you should at least introduce the word subject and predicate to them. So then you're going to want to write a few simple sentences on the board. And some of them should be complete sentences and some should be fragments. Like you might write, "The dog runs," and then also write, "the dog." And then you're going to talk to the kids about which one is a complete sentence and why it's a complete sentence, and then which one isn't and why it isn't a complete sentence. You want to give them lots of examples of this because it takes kids quite a while to understand this. And this isn't just a one and done type lesson. You're going to need to revisit this over and over when you're teaching kids to write sentences. I also had a subject and predicate anchor chart that we used to review this skill a lot because they need to understand that every sentence has a naming part and an action part. So once kids understand what a sentence is and everything that a sentence needs, you can start teaching them how to actually write a sentence. You're going to want to use a gradual release of responsibility, which means first you show them, then you have them do it with you, and then they do it on their own. Sometimes people call this I do, we do, you do. That's the method. So you can begin by writing your sentence on the board. Start with something really simple, maybe 4 or 5 words max. An easy way to begin is by having a picture of some sort to use as a reference. Maybe you have a picture of the park and some kids are playing at the park. So you're going to say, I want to write a sentence about this picture. What kinds of things do you see happening in this picture? And then have the kids tell you stuff like, oh, kids are swinging, or they're sliding down the slide, or they're playing, whatever. And then you're going to say, well, I think I want to write about the kids playing. So I will write, I see kids playing. I wonder how many words that is. So then you're going to say the sentence slowly and put up one finger for each word as you say it. I see kids playing. That's 4 words. Okay, when I finish, I should have 4 words on my page. So that's how you tell kids about how they can count their words when they're writing their sentences to help them remember the words. Then you're going to show them how you begin writing on the left side of the page and move to the right. Tell them that you always begin that way, over on the left, never in the middle or way over on the right. And point to that as you're telling them. So you're going to say, okay, my sentence was, I see kids playing. So my first word is I. Now that might be a sight word or a heart word that you may have already learned. And so it might be in your classroom somewhere on an anchor chart. And if it is, then point that out to the kids because you want them to begin to understand that your word wall and your anchor charts, They're to be used by them, and it's okay to look around for words in the classroom if they know they're there. If not, you can just show them how to write the word I, and then you show them how you use 2 fingers to put a space between the words. Or you can use spacers to help kids with this. I had some little clothespins that were painted to look like astronauts, and we called them spacemen. And the kids could lay them down when they were writing their sentences to help them remember where to leave the spaces. I think I got them on Amazon. I'll link that to the show notes for you so you can check them out. So then you begin to count the words again. I see. Okay, my second word is see. So show them how you sound out the word see and write the letters that you hear. And then you repeat the sentence from the beginning again. And each time you do that, you count the words. I see kids. Okay, my third word is kids. And you do the same thing. Sound out the word and write it down. And then you finish with I see kids playing. That's my fourth word. And you show them how to sound it out and write it. And then you show them how to put a period at the end. And then tell them that the period is like the little stop sign, and it tells people to stop reading when they see that little dot. So when you're all done, go back and point to each word and read it out loud, and then count the words and ask your class, did I write 4 words? And then point out the capital and say, did I put a capital at the beginning? Did I put spaces between each word? And then finally show them, did I put a period at the end? And if they answer yes to all of that, okay, now I've written a complete sentence. So that's the I do part, where you show them how. So the next step is the we do part, which is exactly the same, but this time you have some different kids come up to help you write a different sentence. If you're going to use the same picture of the park as reference, you can ask the kids what another sentence could be. And sometimes they're going to come up with really long, drawn-out sentences like, the kids are playing at the park and they are swinging. And when they do this, you're going to need to explain to the kids that they need to think of shorter sentences when they're first starting to write. So let's think of something shorter like, the kids are swinging. Then call one kid up to help you write the first word. Remind them how a sentence begins with a capital, and then have them write the word. If they don't know how to spell it or can only hear certain letters in the word, you can help them with the letters that they don't know. Whenever you're doing interactive writing with your class like this, you always want to make sure that you're spelling the words correctly. It's fine when they're working on their own to do inventive spelling or phonetic spelling, whatever you want to call it. But when you're doing anything together, you should always make sure that it's spelled correctly. So go through the whole sentence, calling different kids up to help with each word. And as you're working through it, remember to go back to the beginning each time that you write a new word and count the words to see where you are. This really helps kids remember what the sentence was supposed to say, because a lot of times they start writing and then they forget what they even were wanting to write. So if they know how many words they're writing and they keep repeating it back from the beginning, the words will come back to them. And then finally, when you're all done, you can send the kids back to their seat to try it on their own. Now, when they're working on their own, you want to walk around and help the kids who need it. Some kids are going to go back and they're going to be like ready to go and they're going to be writing their sentences, but you're definitely going to have kids who are struggling. So when you find a child that's struggling, have them tell you their sentence and count the words with them. Show them how to begin on the left. Some kids are going to have no problems. Other kids are going to struggle. For kids who really have a hard time with this, I found that putting a line for each word of their sentence really helps. So if the sentence has 4 words, put 4 lines on the paper so the kids know that they need a word on each one of the lines. So then have the kids tell you what their sentence is, count the words, and then put those lines for them and tell them to go ahead and write their first word on that first line. And then while they're doing that, go ahead and help some other kids that need it, and then go back to the other one that you started with and help them word by word if necessary. And that's it. The thing that I found most helpful with teaching kids to write a sentence was showing them how to count their words and keeping their sentences short, only 4 to 5 words, and then making lines on the page for the kids who really struggle. And if you find that some kids are really struggling just to write a word, it probably means they don't have a good foundation with letters and sounds. And if that's the case, then you need to backtrack with them and review letters and the sounds that they make. So what do you do if you have 1 or 2 kids who are really struggling and the rest are ready to move on to sentence writing? Well, you can differentiate the lesson simply by having those kids work on labeling while the rest are writing sentences. It's fine to do that. And you should expect that you're probably going to have to do that because it's rare to have all the kids working at the same level in any classroom. If you give the kids a picture prompt, you can give everybody the same picture, but have some kids write a sentence about the picture and other kids label it. I had some picture prompts that I used, and they were already differentiated with some of the pages having just the picture so kids could label, and others got the picture with lines to write the sentences. It's that simple. I'll link the ones that I used in the show notes so you can check those out. And there you have it, everything you need to get your kids started with sentence writing. I know it can feel like a lot, especially when you've got kids at all different levels. But just remember to keep it simple, break it down, and meet them where they are. Start with a strong foundation and use that gradual release model. And don't be afraid to slow down for the kids who need it. Writing a sentence might seem small, but it's a huge step for little kids. All right, thanks for hanging out with me today. I'll put everything that I mentioned today in the show notes so you can find it there. And until next week, remember to make learning feel like play. See you next time. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you're walking away with some great tips that you can use right away. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the podcast, I'd love it if you'd leave a review. You can find the show notes and links for everything mentioned in this episode at Firstieland.com. I'll see you next week in Firstieland.